Hello everybody and welcome. Let's talk about verbal coordination for VATSIM ATC and how to keep it fast and efficient. The goal for today's session is to know when to use verbal coordination and when to use the Euroscope or Topsky inherent features, and furthermore the use of the appropriate phraseology. Please note that everything in this presentation only applies to VATSIM and has no connection whatsoever to real-life ATC. VATSIM ATC systems are all-knowing, therefore you have all the flight plans available, you can see the cleared levels of aircraft even though they are not within your sector. Also, there is no public information available on the topic that I'm covering in this presentation, therefore I'm not able to provide any sources. And please check with your local VACC because all the coordination parameters in this presentation are subject to local procedures. Before we start going into the verbal coordination itself, we have to look at the built-in Euroscope features in order to avoid unnecessary verbal coordination. You can, for example, request a direct to a downstream sector. That means you have an aircraft on your frequency, you want it to fly to a certain waypoint that is outside of your sector, and you can just request that with the downstream sector. The downstream sector themselves, they can request a direct from you, from the upstream sector, if they need it for separation purpose, for example. You can, via Euroscope, issue level revisions if the aircraft is far enough from the sector border. And you can also request level approvals in cases where the aircraft is already rather close to the border. Those level approvals have to be confirmed by the downstream sector. Also, you can issue sector skips with Euroscope, where you say an aircraft is crossing through your sector, but only for a very short time, or maybe just for a short vertical portion. And you can just say, I don't need this aircraft on my frequency, and I will just skip it. Also, if you and your VACC is using Topsky, you have additional features that you can use to avoid verbal coordination. For example, you can offer speeds and headings to a downstream sector, as well as request speeds and headings from an upstream sector. You can offer releases, and you can request aircraft to be sent over to your frequency. That leaves us with a few items that cannot be coordinated using Euroscope or Topsky, and are therefore subject to verbal coordination. For example, lateral approval requests, a vertical approval request that imply a climbing or descent condition, a request for release from the upstream sector, a temporary deviation from standard operating procedures or letters of agreement, diversions, resolving of conflicts that are very close to the sector interface, complex situations, and basically everything else. When you are coordinating via voice with an adjacent controller, therefore if you're applying verbal coordination, there are a few principles to follow. First of all, keep it short. Second, keep it precise. Third, keep it on point. And fourth, be unambiguous at all times. Let's now listen to a bad example of a verbal coordination between two sectors. Go ahead.
Yeah, servus. Regarding the German Air Force 331, he's in conflict with an aircraft that just departed, and in order to keep him clear, could you either send him direct to Masur or Baruk, or have him climb to flight level 240?
And now let's have a look at a good example of basically the same coordination. Go ahead.
The German Air Force 331 from your side.
Go ahead.
He's requested heading 080 due to traffic.
Let's have a look at some examples for verbal coordination. And let's start with the lateral approval request. What do you need a lateral approval request for anyway? First of all, if you have a significant deviation from a lateral flight path for an aircraft, for example, an aircraft that you have to vector around weather or vector due to traffic, and is going to enter the downstream sector significantly off the lateral flight track, you should ask for an approval for that. You have to get it in advance in order to provide the downstream sector with the chance to react to it and to plan accordingly, and you should normally state the reason. Here's an example for what such a lateral approval request would look like.
Go ahead.
Approval request Lufthansa 123 south of Linz Airport.
Go ahead.
Lufthansa 123, 10 miles south of track, direct to Armut due to traffic.
Is approved.
The same also applies for a vertical approval request, where you are unable to achieve the agreed levels with the downstream sector. So the upstream sector is unable to meet those. In this case, you have to coordinate a, for example, climbing condition for a certain aircraft that is supposed to enter the downstream sector at flight level. Also, get the approval request early in order to provide the downstream sector with a chance to plan ahead. Let's have a look at an example.
Go ahead.
Approval request Lufthansa 123 out Vienna. Can you accept climbing flight level 380?
Lufthansa 123 is accepted climbing flight level 380.
Consider climbing flight level 380. A request for release allows the downstream sector to issue clearances early, while the aircraft is still within the lateral and vertical limits of the upstream sector. The same applies here in order to control vector, climb, descent an aircraft within the sector of the upstream controller. Get the approval for the release in advance. If the aircraft is unconcerned for the sector that you are requesting a release for, so for example, if you want to have an aircraft climbing through a center sector, whereas the aircraft only normally would concern the approach or departure sector, provide context or the position and the level of the aircraft. Let's have a look at an example.
Go ahead.
Request release for climb, München departure, Lufthansa 123.
Lufthansa 123 is fully released.
Deviation from letter of agreement or standard operating procedure is rather generic. Let's have a look at two examples to give you an idea what situations could be that imply deviating from LOAs or SOPs.
Go ahead.
Can you offer higher level for Lufthansa 123? Is very good in climb.
Lufthansa 123 is accepted climbing 360 out of flight level 300. Go ahead.
Until further notice, send all aircraft to destination Vienna at flight level 180.
Consider.
A diversion means that an aircraft is changing its destination. The coordination may be omitted, provided that you change the flight plan accordingly and that there is enough time for the downstream controller to react to that. But in case it becomes necessary because the diversion is happening very close to a sector border, or that you're unable to change the flight plan in time due to heavy workload, this is what a coordination for diversion would look like.
Go ahead.
Check position north of Linz, Lufthansa 123.
Radar contact.
Lufthansa 123 is diverting to Vienna via Baruk 1 Whiskey.
Checked.
For all other situations not covered within this presentation, just keep in mind to keep all the verbal coordinations as short as possible but still unambiguous. And also consider the knowledge of the other controller. That means if an aircraft is unconcerned to a particular controller that you're coordinating with, before getting into the approval request or the coordination itself, point out the aircraft, where is it, in which flight level is it, provide some context, wait for the other controller to acknowledge that he has identified the aircraft, for example, when saying radar contact, and thereafter continue with your coordination and your request. Also, use best judgment on which items are to be coordinated and which are not. Try to keep verbal coordination to a minimum because we do not have a coordinator controller on VATSIM. Most of the controllers on VATSIM are just all by their own. If the adjacent controller is busy, try to reduce verbal coordination to an absolute minimum. Use the Euroscope and Topsky coordination features if possible. Also, try to reduce nuisance requests via Euroscope and Topsky to an absolute minimum. So no unnecessary requests for direct and no unnecessary level requests, heading or speed requests. And if the adjacent controller is busy, try to see if you can help him out without distracting. For example, by deconflicting problems within his own sector that you have some control about. For example, if aircraft are entering from your sector to his sector, and you can already, by, for example, a level change, avoid a potential conflict within his sector, you can do so and should do so in order to help him out. Thank you very much for watching this video. I plan to create more educational videos specifically catered to controlling on VATSIM. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments below, and if you would like to get notified once I upload more videos, please subscribe this channel and enable the alerts. Also, I would like to invite you to follow me on Twitch, the link is in the description. I will try to answer any questions that you may have. To get notified of upcoming streams, join my Discord and you will get notified a few hours before the stream starts. And I promise that I will ping you only once per stream. Please bear with me while I try to improve my video creation workflow and the production quality, and thanks for your support. Goodbye.